Hello and welcome to a special episode from The Hindu on CPIM General Secretary Sitaram Yechury. Mr. Yechury passed away on Thursday afternoon at AIIMS in Delhi. He was suffering from acute respiratory tract infection for which he was admitted in the hospital on August 19th. Mr. Yechury was a multifaceted man, and we will be, over the course of next few minutes, discuss several aspects of his life. To begin with, we will discuss Sitaram, the person. I have with me my colleague Sandeep Phukan. Welcome, Sandeep.
Thank you, Sobhana.
Sandeep, you have perhaps known Mr. Yechury for a far longer time than I have. I have always felt that Mr. Yechury was one of the most warm, articulate, affable person who could make friends with just about anybody, and he could connect across the ages. What are your impressions?
Yeah, well, I've known him for a long time. That's partially because of the fact that I used to cover as a television reporter for almost 10 years, and through the ups and downs of the Indo-US nuclear deal when the left was supporting the UPA government. And Sita was the face. I mean, as you know, that Sitaram Yechury used to be called as Sita, but that's not how I started calling him or addressing him. I used to call him as Sir initially, but then, he's the kind of person who makes you feel very comfortable. And he would say, don't call me Sir, just call me Sita. So, and that's how eventually we got along very well. He was, as I put it yesterday, it was really a privilege to have interviewed him, to have covered him. He was one of the most wittiest, friendliest politicians that I have known, I have covered. As I said, that Indian politics is poorer without Sitaram today. I could only think of two people, Jairam Ramesh and Sitaram Yechury, who could make people of all age groups, whether it's their cohorts or journalists or people half their age, at ease. He had this amazing ability to make you feel special.
Yeah, Sitaram had this really good ability to make jokes and to take jokes. As Jairam was talking to me this morning, and he said that during the UPA era, Jairam used to call Sitaram Obituary. Because
that was part of his farewell speech, by the way.
Yes, accusing him of because the left pulled out of the UPA one, and Sitaram in response used to call Jairam mortuary, right. And he said that all the economic policies of the Congress, especially the ones that Jairam expounded on, would put the Indian economy in a mortuary. But moving on, Sandeep, we need to talk about him as a Marxist. A lot has been said. It has been said he had earned this brand of being a pragmatist, and it was not always in a very flattering manner that he was called this. A lot of people questioned whether he was he was ideologically dedicated to Marxism or not. But what do you think over the course of time? How do you reflect upon it?
So, look, Shomna, we'll also have to examine the context in why this is said, in the context in which these references are made. Look, in my opinion, as a journalist who covered the left parties, in my opinion, one of the biggest achievements of the Indian Marxists have been that they have been able to, without any bloodshed, without any revolution in the real sense, have been able to take part in governance. In fact, the first state government in Kerala was of the left. That was dismissed by the Congress government in independent India, where the Article 356 was used, was actually the left government. So what I'm saying is that they took part in the electoral arena, they contested with other parties and they won, and they have participated. So Sitaram in many ways could actually combine those qualities. He was a Marxist at heart, he was a pure theoretician, whose politics revolved around the politics of livelihood, on the politics of class. He did not believe in identity politics, as opposed to many of the regional parties that believed in the identity politics. And remember, he sort of grew, politically he grew in the same milieu when caste politics was taking shape in many of the regions, but he stayed true to his course. He was at core, he was an anti-imperialist. The last, I think, public outing, if I recall correctly, was a protest where he addressed against the Israeli occupation and attack on Gaza. So Sitaram, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that he was not a hardliner. He was a moderate face.
Yeah.
But he was a Marxist at core. He never, he wrote papers on, even after the collapse of the USSR. He actually defended the Marxist ideology, saying that this is because USSR failed or collapsed does not mean that Marxism, Leninism has collapsed. It has a future.
On that particular issue, in fact, he is one of the few politicians who have come out in open and defended Stalin, and he has said that Stalin was actually the person who stopped the Nazism to an extent, and if without him, the Nazism would have spread further.
Yes, that's what I said, that, he was a Marxist at core, a theoretician, but he also showed that, willingness to be flexible, depending, as he would often say, that changed circumstances demand changed assessment.
Yeah,
and
he
that
would
is,
Lenin's words to
Yes.
say that Marxism, at the end of the day, is concrete analysis of the concrete situation.
Right. So, and this is an aspect which has been acknowledged by none other than Prime Minister, who was an ideological rival opposite. But that didn't come in the way of, Sitaram having a good rapport. They will argue viciously on policy, on their politics. But it doesn't become personal. He knew how to keep his political and personal separate. And the Prime Minister, in his post on X yesterday, said that he was somebody who could reach out. He had the ability of reaching out to people across the political spectrum. And that's very true. And that's a trait, actually, that he learned from his mentor, Kisan Singh Surjit, who played a huge role in coalition politics of our contemporary times.
Yeah, we'll come to that now. Sandeep, taking from the line that you spoke on his opposition to identity politics, and yet in the last one decade, I have seen him handle phone calls from Lalu Prasad Yadav to Sharad Pawar, to even reaching out to Nitish Kumar to construct the India coalition ahead of the 2024 elections. He made similar efforts in 2019, and obviously he was the person who, he was part of the core team that wrote the Common Minimum Program in 1996, in 2004. So he is a man who could connect and bring disparate strands of ideological strands together.
So one flows from the other. As I said, that he was a Marxist at core, and in fact I was forgetting the example before we move on to this part of the question. One example that stands out: Sitaram Yechury and Prakash Karat, two comrades, brothers in arms, they actually prevented Jyoti Basu from becoming the Prime Minister, which later on Jyoti Basu said was a historic blunder. That's because the line within the CPIM is that they do not join governments, or they are not part of any government where they cannot influence policy. And that, in the mid-90s, in 96, the coalition efforts were quite fragile and in early stages, which is why, and they had seen the outcome of that effort during National Front government, which is why there was hesitation. And imagine that two young comrades actually standing up to stalwarts like Surjit and Jyoti Basu and saying that it's a bad idea for Jyoti Basu to become Prime Minister. and the Central Committee turned it down.
Yeah, and
So,
till the end of his life, he was very unrepentant about that decision.
episode, yeah. Yet, it is the same Sitaram who you would find as, twice he authored the Common Minimum Program, both in 96, United Front government, as well as in the 2004 experiment of the UPA, the United Progressive Alliance. Sitaram and Jairam were always sort of collaborating on Common Minimum Program, partially because obviously the left ideas were very different on economic policies, on disinvestment, on privatization, whereas Congress policies were different. So, as one leader put it, that Sitaram was somebody who would look for more for commonalities rather than divergence. So, and that is why, he was unique in terms of working. See, he didn't believe in, as I said, he didn't believe in the politics of caste identity. He would rather focus on livelihood issues and class. But that did not prevent him from, collaborating with Lalu Prasad Yadav or Mulayam Singh Yadav or later on Akhilesh to forge a front, because he believed that the opposition to BJP or coming together, that cause was bigger than his personal opposition or his ideological belief of being against caste politics. And that is why he was the quintessential coalition man. I mean, if there was one quintessential coalition man, if I could think of in contemporary politics, it was Sitaram Yechury.
And he often used a couple of lines he marshaled a couple of lines to sort of justify this goal, and he said that there is an essential need to pool the anti-BJP votes, and there cannot be any leakages, we cannot allow that, and that is the argument that he marshaled when he spoke in favor of Congress and left allying, having an electoral understanding in West Bengal, an issue which was deeply contested within the party, and
especially in Kerala,
and he received a lot of brickbats also for that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as I said, that he could keep aside his personal issues from political, and he had his goals on the larger goal. And in the case of West Bengal, for example, don't forget that he actually took over the party at a time when the left had been ousted from West Bengal, and the Red Fort had collapsed. So it was an effort to rebuild. And strike at Mamata Banerjee's, sort of hold over West Bengal politics. Another famous, he would keep quoting Trotsky, Leon Trotsky, that we march separately but strike together. So that's something that brought them together for India Alliance, where both Mamata Banerjee and CPIM and all other rivals were partners here, but in respective states, Congress and the CPM are bitter rivals in Kerala, as you know. But they collaborated in West Bengal, so that is something. It is difficult to think of these combinations without a Sitaram Yechury.
Yeah.
So that was his special ability.
So briefly, we should also touch upon the 12 years that he spent in the Parliament, in Rajya Sabha, as one of the loudest and clearest voices from the left. One unique aspect about Sitaram, which I believe, is his boundless enthusiasm and a childlike quality where he's up to some mischief every now and then, and he's looking for solutions at all times. And in 2015, I clearly remember in Rajya Sabha, he brought the opposition parties together to pass an amendment to the motion of thanks to the president's address.
Which is very rare. It doesn't happen.
It was only the fourth time in the history of Indian Parliament that such a thing had happened. And even at that point, remember, this is just 1 year after 2014 historic results, which brought BJP in power, and after a long spell, India had a majority government. The opposition is numerically weak, and yet he managed to bring everyone together on board to carry out this coup, one must say.
In fact, I remember one of the things that Sita would always say, in the Rajya Sabha, in the Lok Sabha, BJP had a brute majority, and the ministers could speak whatever they want to, and they were not obliged. As you know, the rule does not oblige ministers or treasury benches to answer to every clarification sought by members of the opposition. But in the Rajya Sabha, rules permit you to ask a question even after a speech has been made.
Yes.
So Sita would always use that rule to try and question after the Prime Minister, especially after the Prime Minister has spoken. He would always get up and try and seek clarifications. So, those things, as you rightly said, he would always be up to some mischief. He would know the rule. He would try and, put the treasury bench on the defensive. But again, at a personal level, they had great equation. Even treasury benches and opposition benches. I remember one of the, Mr. Jaitley's farewell speech, just like Jairam's farewell speech and Ram Gopal Yadav's farewell speech, stood out in the Rajya Sabha when Sitaram Yechury was retiring from the upper house.
I think one of his speeches are also known for the history lessons that they were. He always invoked the past to explain the present. The last bit that I want to discuss on Sitaram with you, Sandeep, is about his international outlook. We were talking earlier, and you were talking about his intervention in Nepal. Could you tell us more?
Yes, so, one interesting thing which is less written about or less talked about these days, but it was well covered then when it happened, was the role that he played along with his classmate and comrade who's no more, late D.P. Tripathi, Devi Prasad Tripathi, who was member of parliament from NCP. So D.P. Tripathi and Sitaram Yechury were close to Pushpa Kumar Dahal, president, who was then leading an underground Maoist movement in Nepal. Sitaram played a huge role in getting, as you know, that Mr. Dahal was also called as Prachanda. So, for being ruthless, and so Prachanda was actually brought overground, and so it was his effort. And the Indian state was also involved in the back channel efforts. That's what we understand. For the CPI, for the Maoists in Nepal, not CPI, I apologize. The Maoists in Nepal to come overground and eventually take part in the political process and then, become part of the mainstream politics in that country. They were also contemporaries in JNU. In fact, both Mr. Bhattarai, Baburam Bhattarai, and Mr. Dahal, Pushpa Kumar Dahal, they were also studying in JNU. So they shared a very close bond with him. So he actually used his personal relationship to, help politically and bring the Maoist forces in Nepal overground and eventually, take part in the mainstream politics of the country.
So,
and also Sitaram, the other part of the thing is that he was heading the international wing of the CPIM, and for the longest time he was like the face of Indian communism or Indian communist movement to the rest of the world. So, and as you know that every party congress, it's a tradition for all countries or other communist movements to send their delegates. So Sitaram was immensely popular. He's one of those rare parliamentarians who's made a rare visit to North Korea, who's traveled many times to Cuba. So, and he would always
and used to love regaling us about his meetings with Fidel Castro.
Absolutely. So, he was a much traveled man, but as I said, that you wouldn't find too many people who would have gone to North Korea. He was one of them.
And one of the last trips abroad, he met Jeremy Corbyn after his historic victory,
Right.
after getting kicked out of the Labour Party in UK. We've come to the end of this episode, but the question is, there is a very large question for the CPM, because Mr. Yechury was the first General Secretary of the party to have died in chair. The CPM stares at a void and need to find a replacement at the earliest. The party congress is scheduled for April. The question is whether they will find his replacement or somebody in the interim to occupy the General Secretary's position till the April party congress. That's all for now from us.